This is the OverReaction podcast.
Greg, brother.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How about you?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. It's another day here in Missouri, although I think it's pronounced Missouri. But a lot of people, if you're landlocked like I am, I was born and raised in Florida, so I miss the beach, and so both my wife and I would call it Missouri.
What part of Missouri?
Good old St. Louis. We're in South County, St. Louis.
East St. Louis?
No. That's actually technically Illinois. We're in South St. Louis. It's nice. The military brought me here, and
okay.
I can't leave, and I can't grow my hair past a certain point after being in the military. So.
Well, at least you still have hair. I don't wear these. I don't wear these slow pads just because of Peaky Blinders. So, military. So you served.
Yeah. So I was a paramedic on Fort Myers Beach Fire and Rescue. I was the youngest paramedic at Fort Myers back in.
Oh wow.
Gosh, graduated in '90s, so early '90s. And honestly, it never really felt right to me. And I was a young man struggling, trying to figure out, kind of what I wanted to do in life. And my whole family was military, except my mother and father were not. The rest of the family was all military. And so, under great advice from family members, I joined the military. And I remember telling my dad that, hey, I signed up for 6 years as an X-ray tech. And he pounded on the table. And it's like, that's the stupidest decision you could have ever made in your entire life. And it ended up being, one of the luckiest, things that I had ever done, because it set my whole career up for success. So yeah, I came to Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, did basic training here, did 6 months at Fort Sam, and then the Army in their beloved wisdom sent me back to Fort Leonard Wood for the remaining part of my time. And so that's how I got from Florida to Missouri.
Nice. So you served. Did you do the full 6 years?
I did the full 6 years. I miss it every day. I mean, if someone said, "Hey, at 53, you can rejoin," it would be hard not to. I mean, I truly loved it. It's a part of my DNA. It's the reason why I strive very hard to make a difference in the federal healthcare landscape. And it's something that is very passionate to me. And plus, I have family in, right? So they need the best care, and so I strive to help provide and be a part of the solution for that.
So why did you what did you do after your service, and then why not stay in?
Fort Leonard Wood at the time was just there was nothing there, and so we decided to leave, get out, and pursue the civilian world. I bounced around for a little bit of X-ray tech at St. Louis University Hospital. And then ended up at a place called Midwest Imaging and Prevention. Remember the old electron beam CT scanners, the EVCT they were called, from Emitron? So I was one of the second people that had purchased that. We also we're the second people in the nation to purchase a little known company at the time called TeraRecon. And so my entrance into the industry was actually my first sales lesson that I'd ever had. And I remember the application, because I went in as applications, right? So 5 days a week, traveling, training people. And the man who run that kept saying to me, "What's it going to take for you to come to work for us?" And I said, "No, I'm not interested in traveling like that." And so finally, I for whatever reason, just said, "Hey, I'm going to come up with $60,000 a year," because I was making like $13 or $14. I thought I was loaded at the time, right? And so he called, a couple of weeks later and said, "Greg, we're serious. What's it going to take for you to come to work for us?" And I said, $60,000. And he said, "Done. I'll see you on Monday." And it was my first lesson in leaving money on the table. So I was one of the original people at TeraRecon, and I had the privilege of working for some really, really great people there. In particular, was a guy named Jeff Sorensen. I don't know if you know who he is, but
I've known Jeff for a while. I just caught up a couple weeks ago.
I modeled my career. I modeled my career after him. He had the unique ability to, whether he was interested in what you were saying or not, really he made you feel like what you were saying was the most important thing, in the world. And so I got a lot of life experience and a lot of industry experience from Jeff. And I do credit him a lot. And from there, left and did some startup company. And I was VP of North America, and it was really like a chief operating officer. But it was my entrance really into owning the service vertical, the professional services vertical, marketing vertical, sales vertical, and all of that ended up being on my shoulders. And we successfully moved that to the acquisition stage. Philips Healthcare bought that. And then found myself, my first iteration into the PACS world was Intelard. And I loved that. And they wanted to stand up a federal healthcare vertical. And so I was recruited for that mission. And then when they got into it and realized all of that was required regulation-wise, security-wise, and basically had to open up the kimono rug to see everything that they did, they didn't really want to go down that route. And so when Agfa called, they had a very successful track record in healthcare. And so they asked me to take the lead here in the federal space, which has been a great privilege to work with some of the brightest people who have, there's an entire business model built around the federal space here. So it's very exciting. It's a good time, but that's how I ended up here. And for whatever reason, I've just had a niche for the federal world and contracting and surviving in it, I guess is the best way to say.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about working with the federal government?
Oh,
and
there's
federal agencies.
Yeah, the big one is that there's this endless pocket of money. And I think that's where a lot of industry people go wrong. I tell you, I had a conversation with the people that buy enterprise imaging years ago, and they were mesmerized because they had gotten a hold of commercial quotes for the same product. And the product was marked up like 4 times more for the government. And I think it just speaks volumes to where people think the industry is that, hey, the government's just got an endless, they just print money and you can charge whatever you want to. And, maybe 10, 15 years ago, you could have made a case for that, but the world is changing, Jeremy. They've brought in some of the best and brightest people in the federal space that are committed to making change. I think the other misconception is that the VA is just some hodgepodge group of people that are flying by the seat of their pants, and it's really not. When you dig into it, you realize there's a lot of very talented people there, and that the biggest problem facing the VA isn't a lack of knowledge or a lack of empathy for veterans or ability. It's that there's such a disparity in income between federal healthcare employees and commercial healthcare employees that once you get into the field and you realize that an X-ray tech, for example, is making $20,000-$30,000 more in the commercial world, and doctors, heaven forbid, they're making several $100,000 more. You understand why they have attrition, and you understand that attrition leads to other problems. But I think deep pockets and that the VA is a hodgepodge organization are probably the greatest myths that are being portrayed right now.
Yeah. Do you still have to work with primes? Like, it's one thing I've never understood. I was like a board member for a PPE company, and the amount of hoops they had to jump through I understood why people didn't want to work with the government, because they had to go through primes and subcontractors and all this stuff. And it was, I'm like, that's a lot of friction. That's a ton of friction that the costs have to get absorbed by that company. So I could kind of see why companies would want to try to juice this price through the roof, because they're like, hey, what they're going to net is less. Now, I'm not saying they should do it, like 3-4x. I could see someone saying, hey, we're going to charge the government 20-25% more because it's harder to work with them. We got to work through these primes and subs.
That's actually a fact. I mean, in federal contracting, there's 2 schools of thought. One is there's an initiative to give business to what's called an SDVOSB, so a small disadvantaged veteran-owned small business. Right? They always get preference. and rightfully so. I mean, otherwise the big companies would just take over the world.
Yeah.
When we contract with those folks, so when you look at a company our size, we're a medium to large size company, and so we have what we call a stable of SDDOs that we use. Those companies mark things up, and so when you say there's a cost because of the effort, that's very real, and contractors and government do know this, and they acknowledge that. There's also built-in cost when we sell direct, and we've outlined in our federal contracts that doing business with the federal government requires extraordinary effort beyond what we do in the commercial world, and thus, there's a bump in what we do for them. So you're 100% correct. The effort involved in doing federal work is a lot more intense and a lot more taxing than doing in the commercial work.
What do you think they can do to streamline that? Or do you think that's even possible? There's any appetite for that to happen?
You just opened up Pandora's box, right?
Sweet.
So right now, the one of the biggest problems facing the federal government is that they're constantly a year to 2 years behind the development curve of the commercial world. There's a really unfortunate reason for that. The acquisition process is insanity. I mean, it is absolute bananas, right? This fairness, way they look at fairness, the way they look at being able to communicate with vendors, it is set up much like you do expect the federal government. So much bureaucracy in it, so many anchor points that hold you back. And so we're working with the acquisition people right now. So we sell under what's called a DINPACS contract. You ever heard of that? So years and years and years ago, Congress mandated that all PACs in the federal government, whether it's VA, Indian Health Services, DOJ, or DHA, would all be purchased under what's called an IDIQ, indefinite quantity, indefinite time contract. And Agfa has been the only vendor that's been on all 4 iterations of that. But that contract is a limiter, right? It's built around 1990 concept that PACS is a box you put here, you throw it out, and it kind of expands in this beautiful tent and lands perfectly, right? And you pay X amount, and then you pay X amount percentage of that as SMA. And the world is just drastically changing. It's changing right before our very eyes, and so they haven't really updated that process. Now, recently, the newer people coming into DHA understand this, right? A lot of them are from the commercial world and saying, whoa, this is just crazy. Like we want to be on the bleeding edge. We want our veterans to have bleeding edge technology. We want our military families and soldiers to have bleeding edge technology. There is no way that we can provide that under this current acquisition model. So DINPACS 5, they just released what's called an RFI for that. And we've been very instrumental in helping shape that, as is other vendors. So it's not just us that people do, but other vendors have been saying, we need things like a SaaS model. And that requires the government to change its perception about how it does things. For instance, the government can only commit 1 year at a time to anything because of congressional funding. So because of that, you would say, well, normally we get into a SaaS model where all of your services included, your updates are included, it just boom, it's perfect. We keep you up to date constantly. We can't work like that right now because the government won't commit to past year 1. And so they're still stuck in the 1990s way of buying things. It's just straight CapEx purchase. Well, if you look at the industry, Jeremy, the idea of you just having a on-prem, disparate siloed type enterprise, whatever it is, doesn't really matter if it's enterprise imaging or not. But this disparate siloed way of doing things is just not how the industry is going, right? It's going into the cloud. 3 years ago, cloud was a taboo word. We can't say cloud security, blah, blah, blah. Well, now, like all things, we found out that, hey, it is really secure. We can manage that. The government has its own tenancy in AWS and in Azure. But the acquisition process still sucks. I mean, it's still like, come on, guys, the world isn't moving at this pace anymore. And I think, as soon as they get around that, and we're hoping that this new contract vehicle will do that. We're hoping that some of the new leadership at DHA and VA Healthcare will change that, and that our veterans and servicemen and women and their families would just get the quality of care that they really are. They should be getting.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why. I know it's kind of a hot topic, and maybe I'm just jumping on a field of hot coals that also have daggers in it. But it's one of the reasons why I think the push to root out mass inefficiency and fraud and waste is so important, because eventually the money does run out, and we either start taking action now, or the big A word austerity measures will take hold in future years, which will be draconian,
Right.
by compare to the hysteria about what's happening now. But what's interesting is when you do look at efficiency and you do look at fraud and waste, and people scream and they yell about it, but then you look at it and you find out the sheer magnitude of small groups that are extracting all of this money and resources out, that are really gumming up the system. And
It's
so
insanity. It's truly insanity. I think, again, there's this. I feel kind of privileged to be part of an evolution that I'm watching right before my eyes, right? Where 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was like, well, it's not my money. Right? I heard this so much. It's like, we made $100,000 mistake, and we'll just, we'll just kind of throw that to the wind, and we'll go and get this $200,000 thing that we need. I think a lot of that had to do with, until recently, the federal government, I think, had a lot of what I call the least common denominator people that were making $1 million decisions, and a lot of times their experience level was this, and unfortunately that's not how software is now. I mean, you really need to have a software background to be buying anything. It doesn't really matter what it is, in my opinion, the federal government. But for healthcare, I think you really need people in place that have grown up in healthcare and that can manage people. I'm not saying, just the guy that signs the contract and sends it off, but I am saying the people that are making the decisions up until recently didn't have, I think, a lot of the background necessary to make that decision. And so you saw a lot of fraud, or maybe the better way to say it is just mistakes. Right? They made mistakes, but it was okay because it wasn't my personal checking account that it was coming out of. And so I get very upset about that. I'm a taxpayer as well.
Yeah.
So we really ensure that solutions are actually, we're looking at 5-year horizon when we're talking about these. How are these going to impact? Are you thinking that far down the road? And as of late, DHA is really taking the lead on this, as far as putting the right people in place to be able to make decisions. And VA, at its upper echelon, is doing the same thing, but there's just so much bureaucracy that happens in the VA that DHA is able to overcome because it's military. And they can say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to march out in that direction, and everybody's going to do that. And if you don't like it, kind of tough. Where the VA is a little bit more committee decision, but it's coming along. It's coming along slowly, sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll let everyone know I'm a libertarian. I always have been. So I'm like, I'm not. There's things for veterans and military, et cetera, are super important, and they should have better than what they do have across the board: benefits, access to mental health, healthcare. I mean, they should get the best of the best. They shouldn't be getting substandard care simply because there's no physician that's altruistic enough to say, or there's very few that are saying, I'm going to make substantially less and stay in, debt, et cetera, longer,
Right.
just to serve other people. I'd like to, but the disparity is so different. I have to look after my family first. So I'm glad and hopeful that some of this thing is really going to happen. I just get nervous every time the government steps into industry, because I look at meaningful use, and it's becoming more acceptable to say it. It's 'cause a long time you would basically be the scarlet letter on your chest if you brought it up. But so I look at meaningful use. I don't know in the High Tech Act actually if it really helped innovation at all in healthcare. In fact, I make the argument that it actually hurt, because it was a very narrow window of, you have to put an EHR like this according to this timeline that did this, that was rolled out like that. And it artificially created kind of a big monopolistic or duopolistic thing where, because EHRs I remember coming into healthcare back in 2003, and they called it CDR orders and charting. EHR wasn't actually a term yet that was used very much, or EMRs. There's a little bit, because people would have a different ordering module and they might have a different charting module that they would use. But things were happening, like care innovation and shared medical, they were being implemented. And so I just wonder what would have happened if the government just put out an incentive, no stick, and didn't say you had to have it by here or had to have it. They just said, hey, you're going to get a little extra Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements over the next 7 years if you get stuff off paper, right?
Yeah,
they didn't have to step in and force it and then have their requirements written by a couple different big companies that happen to map exactly to them. And now the reason AI is exploding so much is because the EHRs by and large did not help efficiency at all with doctors and nurses. It didn't improve care that we could look at, and increased burnout and frustration, all the other sorts of things. And so now you have AI that's popped up to go, hey, spend all this extra money and get these bots to make the EHR usable by bypassing the doctors and nurses don't have to
Don't get me started on this. This is I lump the term meaningful use, interoperability, and AI all into the same category, right? And there's a shirt that's, everybody wants to be a gangster until it's time to go do gangster stuff, right? So, it reminds me of, everybody wants to do meaningful use until it's really time to put meaningful, stuff together. And, what the government did, and, they do it even, in the world that I see all the time, is they sort of load up the shotgun and go, boom, out goes meaningful use to everything. It just goes out with no plan. We just need it by this time. And to your point of letting the market handle that, I think EHR was a natural evolution, right? It was naturally going to happen.
For sure.
And to say, hey, okay, you need to have it all done by this time. All it did was rush hospitals into spending money in a rather rushed decision, getting it, distilling it, understanding it, and going, oh, I wish we'd have done it different.
And it wasn't ready then. There's the thing is, these EHR vendors needed to fail more. They needed to innovate more and iterate faster as they were going along. You look at the coolest technology out there. You can go across anything. Which of the ones where the government said you have to do it and the users have to use it in this way? I don't know of one.
Right.
I look at smartphones. I look at laptops. I look at, even the best electric vehicles, all sorts of things, and satellite dishes and all this stuff. It's, if the government came in and said producers have to do it this way, consumers have to buy it by this time, and if they don't, they're going to pay more taxes or something. If you did that kind of stuff, it's what makes me so concerned about. And I don't know if you've seen a couple of the posts I've done about AI, where we need to have a governing body that's going to decide which AI is good and make sure it's really safe and it's not going to do harm. And I'm like, well, there you go. You have a 12-cylinder engine, and the government's decided only 2 cylinders can ever work.
What's
There you go.
fascinating about
There's the speed limit now. We've set the speed limit.
What's fascinating about the government is the number 2 priority in VA healthcare and DHA, second only to veterans health, so veteran suicide is the primary thing that they look to solve, is AI. And when I ask them what their strategy is that there is no strategy. I just know I have to have AI. I'm going to check the AI box. And so, what I've strived to do with the military is ask them, and you see me post this all the time, is what are you trying to solve? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Right?
Bingo.
If you're trying to solve, I want to find lung nodule analysis. I would say maybe you're barking up the wrong tree. Right? The doctors don't have a problem finding the lung nodule. They have a problem finding the lung nodule when it's the 1,001 study that they read, and 990 of them were negative prior to that. Right? So, if you want to increase throughput through the department or through your hospital, it doesn't really matter if it's radiology, cardiology, pathology. It doesn't really matter what it is, right? But if you want to increase throughput, reduce physician burnout, look for the AI companies that actually attack what the source problem is. And when you go back to what is plaguing the VA right now, what's plaguing the VA is their customer base is exploding exponentially. And it was never built for that, right? So if suddenly the VA didn't exist and all of the veteran care got dumped out into the world, you would see IDNs collapsing. They're just not built for it either. Yeah. And so when I look at...
There'd have to be a special Medicare thing just for them.
Yes. So AI, when you want to improve, so I'm a fan of AI, but I'm a fan of AI done right, solving the right problems. And so when we talk with Department of Defense, and here's an interesting stat for you, is that if you look at the Army, what we call readiness within radiology, so they have a stats that says, okay, we are ready for combat at this level. They're like 50% below staffing capability to call themselves ready. Okay. The Navy is like at 30%, and I got this directly from Walter Reed. Okay. They're at like 30% below staffing, and the Air Force is skimming like right below the surface of readiness. And when you ask them why that is, it's like, well, the doctors are getting out. We don't have enough doctors to read, and that was really why DHA was formed, because it used to be just Army, Air Force, Navy, and they all operated independently. So DHA was formed. We blurred the lines in healthcare so that, if there's only 4 neuropediatric radiologists in all the Department of Defense, well, who cares if the pediatric patient is from an Army family, if the best is in the Air Force to read it. So AI, what we're trying to help them with is how do we force multiply our reading capabilities? And if you're looking at any other AI that doesn't force multiply that, you're gonna go down the meaningful use. To go back to your meaningful use, you're gonna go down the meaningful use category of checking the box of AI, and you spent all this money and you didn't really see the results that you were hoping for, and it's extremely frustrating. But luckily, the folks at DHA, they've got their listening ears on, and they're also looking at ways to force multiply. And the same thing in the VA, right? They're no longer looking at the individual VA hospital. So VAs are clustered in what's called a VISN, and then groups of VISNs are clustered in what's called a region. And they are now falling back. There used to be 23 VISNs, they're now falling back. There's 18. Now they're going to fall back to probably about 10 or 11 in the next 5 years. And the reason that they're doing that is so that they can bring their radiology community closer together and use all of these resources across the nation. And so they're shopping for a single PACS now that will go across the entire VA infrastructure. It'll save money. It will inevitably link into DHA. And here's a bit of breaking news for you. Over the last 2 months, the leadership at VA and the leadership at DHA have started doing their own blurring of the line. So right now, DHA is responding to teleradiography needs from the VA. Their doctors are a little more idle, and so I think what you're going to see, you heard it here first, right? Maybe not, but I believe what you're going to see in the next 3 years is a blending of federal healthcare, and that you're going to see a single enterprise imaging solution that is not just a patch, Jeremy. It's actually a platform, and then it's going to morph from a platform into what's called a system integrator, where you're going to see, the backbone of all imaging, which in my opinion is important as an EHR, all going through one single platform, one single viewer across the line. They've already got one single EHR. VA just started their implementation of Cerner across the board. I think you're going to see really big things come from them now that Oracle is kind of driving.
If you listen to the podcast that just published today with Tressa Springman from LifeBridge, she's seen under the covers a lot of the stuff at Oracle, and she's just like, this is next gen. Like it is cloud, rewrit. There's no more Cerner code. It's cloud native. It's in their OCI, in the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Like they have dozens and dozens of native AI built into it. She's like, it is an order of magnitude beyond anything else that's out there. And hopefully that gets sooner than later into the VA. But back to your point, I mean, it makes sense that it'd be like it. So let's say it's Agfa and you guys are all the system integrator. It's your job, like you said, like stop talking about, well, I want AI or this solution. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Or way Clayton Christensen, you would say, what's the job to be done? Just what do you need done? And then you'll find and work with the different AI companies to plug in to your platform as a system integrator. Say, oh, this is the best for, neuro studies with an MRI, and this is best for just basic chest X-ray. Just eliminating all normals. It's just normal, nothing's there. This AI is the best, most accurate, seamless, and it'll help you be more efficient.
We're there already. Just for the record, we're there already.
Perfect.
So one of the things that we have started at here is that in the federal government, when we do a contract with someone, we sell them something. The expectation is that that's going to be available for the length of the contract. And so, AI companies are a bit fly by night, right? There's lots of, sketchy leadership, sketchy financial, whether you're going to be here in a year or two. And so one of the things that we help the federal government do is vet that, right? Is this company going to be solvent in 3 years? Not that we're so much worried about, whether they're there for you, but, I don't want to have to support a company that is no longer around that I don't have any resources to. So the benefit to large, platform companies or system integrators, or whatever you want to call them, is that they're doing the vetting. And that is a massive amount of work taken off the buyers, as we call them, in the federal government, who may or may not have the skill set to actually, vet that company out. And so we're doing the vetting. And again, it all comes back to, what is your strategy? What problem are you solving for? Are you checking the box? Because if you're checking the box, you're setting yourself up for failure. If you really want to make a difference, you have to think 5 years ahead of where you're at. Where is the puck going to be? And where are we striving to go? And we're going to intersect at that point down the road. And so we're really trying to help the government vet these things out, because they're spending money, Jeremy. We've got quotes out to, for AI all over the place. So, and I'm getting inundated with AI vendors that want to be a part of that. And, most of the time I'm like, what's your, roadmap? You're going to be bought out in 3 years by a company, or, what is your story? And to your point, someone has to help vet this stuff out, because it is literally bananas right now.
I mean, isn't it funny that, it's funny if you're in the space, how the thing I noticed that you're talking about the vetting process is you didn't mention their technology. You mentioned their leadership, culture, et cetera. Because I haven't come across, and I've probably seen demos of 60, 70 AI companies across not just imaging, but rev cycle, automation, front office, all that stuff. I haven't seen any of the demos, and these are live. These aren't like the PowerPoint that I wasn't like, that's cool. That's legit tech. But then I have to look at, are they a real company?
Yeah.
Can they be a real company? What's their leadership? And what's interesting is that I almost have this little, my spidey sense is pinged on, wow, this is a great technology. And during the demo, I can kind of figure out, do these people have any healthcare experience? And so while they're showing it to me, I go to their website and, I'm trying to pay attention, but I'm looking up at LinkedIn and I'm like, almost every one of these people are Silicon Valley people. They have almost zero healthcare. And I'm like, I wouldn't recommend you to anybody because you do not understand the space. You think that just because you have smart people and we got this dude's and this lady's a PhD in AI from MIT, and then she did Stanford fellowship or whatever it is. I'm like, I don't care. What does that matter? Like some of the smartest people I met are guys that didn't even go to school, didn't go to college, and they're the hackers extraordinaire. Like, but who understands healthcare really well? And are there more of them than just one? And are they the ones making the decisions? Because if they're not, I don't care. Because there's a couple companies, and we even had some customers of ours where their leadership changed 2 or 3 times in a 2-year period because they kept failing, crammed down round, raising money. And then they finally went what we were mentioning earlier, which is you need some gray hairs, people that have been in healthcare, and they understand the inefficiencies and all the weird things that are really features of the system that aren't bugs that you just think you can innovate around. It's not going to happen. So it's interesting, just kind of a long rant about your thing on, you didn't mention tech one time.
It's because the tech is G with bang. It's G with bang. It's like, cool, that's cool. Right? And the immediate question to ask every single time, if you're shopping for AI, if anybody's listening to shopping for AI, the question to ask is, what problem are you trying to solve? And is that the problem facing healthcare? Right? Is that the problem? It is the fact that you pick whatever G whiz bang. Is that what's slowing down throughput through a department, through the check-in process of a patient? Is that what's going on, or is it something else? And there are
if you throw them a curveball question, you just say, okay, what happens if the radiologist is at night reads doing XYZ, and what happened? You can watch them go, you don't understand, do you?
Yeah, they have no idea about. I think it's like God, it's just like meaningful use. There's money going to come out, and people are going to spend it because no hospital administrator, federal or commercial, wants to say, I'm really skeptical about AI. I'm not real sure how that helps us. Now, you'll come across people who I think are top tier level CIOs or top tier level physicians or top tier level CEOs that are asking that question, right? But I think still there's a tremendous amount of people that are looking to check the box. So, in my world, in the federal world, we are literally guiding the customers and saying, don't know about it. What are we doing here? Like, are we checking the box? Because if so, we'll ring you up, right? But if you're not checking the box and you want to do something really cool, let's really drill into the problem. And when we do that, we have very fruitful conversations. We gain a seat at the table to talk with the customers. There's a trust value that comes up, and that is invaluable in our world to have that trust. But,
I'm a little concerned what's going to happen with rural health. I mean, you got like $50 billion coming in, and the states have to submit everything by, I think, November 5th, and then then they got to start deploying the individual hospitals, and that have a few months later to do. And it's going to be interesting to see a lot of carpetbagger companies coming in that that fundamentally don't understand people who live in rural areas. I grew up rural. Like my little village I lived in up in Canada was like 600 people. We had kindergarten through 12th grade in one building. It was like a Little House on the Prairie, for crying out loud. It was weird.
Sounds awesome. I'm a hunter.
It's awesome. It's awesome. It's awesome, but it's weird. There's like rural where you're close to a big population area, and then there's rural where there's your closest town only has a couple thousand people, and it's like 7 miles away. You get some real. I have some stories, man. It is some weird people because it's either old school ranchers, farmers that have been there for 150, 160 years, or it's people that are hiding. And they're not hiding from normal society. They're hiding from, police, etc. But it's a different thing. And so, in fact, I was catching up with somebody yesterday. Guy's one of the best people in rural health. He is hands down cares about it, knows about it, serves it. Like they do these big advisory projects for these rural health, but their whole thing is, if we extract $1, we've got to give at least $4 or $5 benefits back.
Mhm.
Like we're talking insanely high. So he loves it. And he was talking about this meeting where they're out in, I can't even remember where, some little association of a rural facility. I think it was in Kansas, Nebraska, something like that. And they said the law comes out, or legislation comes out, it's going to have all this funding, and all of a sudden in these little meetings, first time at all, some of the big hyperscalers were there. He said, Jeremy, you couldn't believe how disconnected they were. You could tell they were Harvard people, Stanford people, and they were talking like these people were dumb. We're going to put in AI. It's going to replace jobs, et cetera. Like, do you understand a rural health facility is like a cornerstone of that little tiny town, that little county, that poor county? You're saying that you want to get people fired? Like, do you not?
That's not going to go over well.
Do you not understand the room at all?
Right.
But the concern is those are the guys that are going to come just pouring back in, and a lot of this money is going to get sucked up, and
it's like roofers.
There won't be a good return.
It's like roofers. No offense to roofers, right? But as soon as the storm hits here, we get them all the time in Missouri. We get any amount of hail, and my door rings 25 times, a week from a company that just showed up. That is the best roofing company in the world. But on your rural story, I'll give you a little bit of feedback. So within Department of Defense is an organization called JOMIS, right? And JOMIS is charged with what happens, how do we handle the ships that are dark, our special forces that are out at forward operating bases and things of that nature. And tying this into the AI conversation as well, and how can AI actually help? There are companies that are out there right now that provide the negatives. You just pick a chest X-ray. I do a chest X-ray. It compares it against millions of studies, and it can find it can say with a sensitivity and specificity of like 98, 99 respectively that there's nothing there, and it's checking for these 10 things, right? And so one of the reasons that these are very popular in the Department of Defense is because of our forward operating bases that don't have full-scale radiologists, that have what we call 18 deltas, so the special forces medics, right, that are borderline PAs or doctors depending on the situation. And they do have X-ray machines at these places. So someone critically injured, their first stop is the forward operating base for ABCs, and imaging is done there. And these companies can let the medic know, hey, this is most likely zero, right? There's most likely nothing to worry about, and that reduces sort of the triaging of where these soldiers end up. And if you extract that into the rural community, one of the things that I think AI can really help with there is offloading some of that burden, right? Some of that, hey, this is I'm going to help you get some of this done, some of this work done.
Yeah.
And so when you say that, you've got the people coming in that don't really relate and they don't understand, I am a huge supporter of that comment, because I don't think they really have any idea about workflow and how and what they may be selling could be, revolutionary into the rural world. But it's the pitch,
But they know that, but they also don't care, man. Like, you really care. You really care about what you're doing in the mission, right? To help vets and their families and those people that support them, right? Yeah, right. I mean, and it comes across when you have someone who's not rural. And you can tell they don't care. They don't care. They don't understand us. They don't know us. And how could you care about us when you don't? You can't.
Right.
It's almost like getting in the Bible. How do you love someone you don't know or haven't served? You don't. If you haven't served someone, you actually can't have. Yeah. You don't have love for them because you've sacrificed nothing for them.
Yeah, we are seeing this not only from the small but from the top. We see a lot of fly-by-night companies coming up and wanting to be a part because the money just entered the water like chum, right? Like the government just threw it out there. Yeah. Hey, they had a PAX Innovation Week at DoD before Dietrich last October, and basically it was announced, hey, we're going to go to a single PAX, and we're going to have a single organization company, a single templating company, a single of this, a single of that, and it's just going to go across the board, right? So we're not going to have hodgepodge mismatch anymore. And after that meeting, I probably got 50 meeting requests from the sort of small coming up. And then an interesting phenomenon happening, which is the big boys started coming down as well. And, we do a lot of work with Leidos. I don't know if you know who they are, but they're the prime. When you mentioned prime earlier, right? They were the prime on the Cerner PAX. But we do a lot of work with those. But we had a lot of other companies top down come to us. Zero plan, Jeremy, zero execution, zero thought on how to do it. And when I first met the folks over at Leidos, I was like, tell me why. And out came this why. Out came this mission to people that served and were in healthcare and understood it. And it's not a commercial for Leidos, so please don't take it that way. But my point with it is that they understood what we were trying to do as sort of that medium level. We've done a lot of work with, like, familiar with NetApp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So NetApp created an interesting thing at DHA. They created a private cloud. And so, AWS has GovCloud and all that stuff. We talked about that a little earlier. But DHA set up a private cloud. And that was in response to, constant hacking, trying to get in. So now they're going to set up enterprise imaging within their own firewall. VA is looking a little bit like they're going to go to AWS GovCloud. We have some DNA stood up in there, but I think the big companies need to keep an eye on the mission, right? What is the mission statement? Otherwise, you're going to get caught up with the GWiz Bang stuff. You're going to get big companies are going to get churned out. Little companies are getting churned out. And it comes back to what I said earlier about the gangster shirt, like switch out AI. Everybody wants to be in AI until it's time to really go do AI, right, and be successful. And that's where it all falls apart. I think you had it was you or somebody else on LinkedIn posted about, pilots, pilot programs. Was that you that did that?
No, it was. I reshared that one because it was so. I didn't see at the bottom they did a super shameless pitch for themselves, but I'm like, whatever. The top part was awesome.
Right.
Like, fine. Yeah. So I reshared it, but I wasn't the original.
Yeah. To me, that's a little bit of, I think, the state of the union of the industry. Come do a pilot. And to your point, they don't really have a clue on what the workflow is or what the mission actually is. And then when it comes time to really invest in that, they either don't have the stomach for it or they don't have the funds for it. And, we've been in the business for about 30 years in the federal government, and, we have the stomach for it, and so we vet this. We take great pride in the relationship with the government. Far exceeds priority than the relationship with a fly-by-night company that is looking for a quick hit to be bought out at some point, which is a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the private cloud with NetApp. It's an interesting idea. I live way out up in the mountains, and so I haven't gone down the EV or Tesla route, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But Mike, even if I did, I don't want it because I just don't want to be tracked. And they're like, well, how do you update the software? And I said, I'd set up a local server, allow Tesla to update right there. And then I would disconnect that now from the internet. I would manually update the software myself, and then I would disconnect it again. Like, you don't want Big Brother all up in your business? Well, a little bit Big Brother, but also I had a real genius programmer from India that worked for me before, and he's like, he on his smartphone could hack into my truck
Right.
because there's a computer and it connects to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, all that stuff. He took over my truck like in 2 minutes, and I'm like,
Yeah. We have the Tesla.
so.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have. I'll never
No, no,
tell
no.
anyone not to get it. I've got my own. Maybe it's just because I grew up so much in the sticks for this whole time. You just never, it's almost like the beginning of Brother, Where Art Thou? Goes, I nicked the census, man. You from the bank?
Well, my wife has that. I have the lifted F-150, true redneck style, right? I hunt
Nice.
and fish, so.
Yeah.
But I would say 5 years ago, the government put out the single PACS initiative. VA followed. And what's interesting about it all, Jeremy, is the convergence of commercial and federal healthcare in thought, about how, IDNs are getting bigger. So how do we look to solving, force multiplying our capabilities? The government is going the same route. So, your original lead off was, what are the problems, facing it? It's almost the same problems that are facing the commercial world. It's just how they go about acquiring and moving in the right direction are radically different. But I think the federal government, with respect to AI, is going to be probably out there in front because they don't have to worry about the reimbursement component of that, and they can move down the road. And I think the commercial world is going to, at some point, look towards the federal government to say, how did this work, right? How did you implement that? And so, for me, I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a part of that conversation, right? In guiding them at a very senior high level, at the director level of DHA and, at the secretary shelving level for VA, and giving them and asking those questions and not just ringing them up, not just, the old Bugs Bunny rolling dollar signs in your eyes is not happening. We're asking very loaded questions and forcing them into a very uncomfortable position to have to form a strategy, right? And the result of that is very fruitful conversations. So I would say stay tuned and look at the federal government with respect to AI. I think they're going to lead the way. I do think CMS will come around to reimbursement sooner rather than later. Probably like they did with advanced visualization, where they just attach a modifier to a CPT code. So, you do a CT of the chest width, and if you do any kind of AI, you can attach that like you could if you did any kind of advanced visualization work. I think that's probably going to be the route they go. But it's super exciting. We're putting together some really fantastic things for the federal government. It's exciting, and when my part is done, right, when they get that enterprise imaging, whether it's with us or with somebody else, I'm going to retire to my bass boat, right? And I'm going to call it a day and say, I did my part in trying to make it better, for my veteran friends and for my family that's on active duty.
We'll have to sit down at HIMSS, and I think HIMSS is what, 6 months or something like that. Sit down at your booth. We'll do a little 15-minute record session. You just do an update on what's happened.
Love it. Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I read all your stuff, right? I feel like I'm sitting here talking to like a movie star. You got your own podcast, and you're prolific on LinkedIn. And I'm like, dude, how did that happen? That guy's rock star level.
So do you know how I do that? Well, I'm not, but thanks. But you know how people think that I spend a lot of time thinking about my posts, or that I have a team of people, and I don't. I just have stuff set up on Google Alerts. I've searched on AI, customer success, patient experience, whatever it is. And it just comes through, and I'll just 5-10 minutes a day, I just kind of read through the headlines. And if something catches my eye in a headline, I click on it, scan it, and then I just post. First thing that comes to mind, I just throw it up. I do almost no editing. So an entire week, I'll probably post 7 to 10 times. It might take 30 minutes total for the whole week. I don't think. People
don't understand. I thought you planned all this stuff out, right?
No, man. I'm letting people know. It's like with multiple choice. Your first impression 9 times out of 10 is right. Don't rethink. Don't edit. Don't go through. But people are also I kind of get, because I run Reaction, so I guess my investors and the board could fire me, but outside of that, I can kind of do what I want. But they're kind of worried about how they're going to come across. They're so worried about, could this be taken the wrong way? Might I offend someone? And the second you're doing that, it would be like Picasso. Picasso's not, his paintings wouldn't have been. If he'd have been worried about how people thought about his painting, they had to suck. And I'm not Picasso. I'm not trying to make that corollary, but I'm just saying that it's like, if people, what was the first thing came to your mind, just write it. And maybe if you went way insane, edit that back, but then just publish, just post it. So
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. I'm prolific on LinkedIn to sometimes my own company chagrin, right? Because I'm very passionate about it. And luckily for me, where I'm sitting at right now, in the chair that I'm sitting at in this company, we align a lot, right? We align on philosophy, right? I work with some extremely talented people, some of the best that I've ever worked with, as far as getting it, like just that's a term I use all the time internally is, you guys, we have to get it. We understand it. Now we just have to go communicate, right? And we cannot come off of it. We can't. I refuse to compromise in those values and in what I believe is enterprise imaging. It could be narcissistic. I don't know, right? But I believe I see the path to go. I mean, I'm convinced on what the final solution should look like in the path to get it. I just have to cut through and help people cut through the white noise of what all the chatter out there in the world is, because they don't know. Right? They haven't lived it for as long. They don't read all the journals all the time. They're 9-to-5ers, and so it's the solution isn't always Agfa, right? Sometimes the solution is somewhere else. But what I love is the fact that the people I work with share that enterprise imaging vision, and we were not afraid to cut our teeth, sometimes very painfully, Jeremy, right? Sometimes very painfully.
Sure.
Cut our teeth and come out the other side a better solution for doing that. And I'm very proud to work with people that share that, and with leaders that aren't afraid to be on the bleeding edge and say, we believe we're going to go down this path. Okay, we're going to go this way. Somebody's got to step off a home base. Someone's got to take that first step and start walking. Now that may be a stutter step, and we may not see the log, and we may trip over it. But we're going to get back up. We're going to put our foot forward, and we're going to keep rolling in that direction, because we believe this is the way it should go. And 5, 6, 7 years ago, right, 8 years ago, there was internal angst, and now the company is completely aligned, marching off in this direction. It's showing. Department of Defense and VA HealthCare are, the relationship is really, really strong right now. So I'm super proud of that, Jeremy. Right?
That's awesome.
If I left today, right, and retired today, I would say that I at least hope that I made some people think about doing what they're doing, instead of just throwing money out of willy-nilly and not care. So it's been a good. I've had a really, really good time here. And I'm glad
that's great.
Make a difference in healthcare. And federal healthcare is got its problems, but it's the new breed of people that are coming in there, Jeremy, are literally like some of the best and brightest that DHA and VA have ever had. So stay tuned.
It's about time, long overdue. That's great, man. This has been awesome. We could go on and on. Is there anything, and we got like a minute left, anything we didn't cover we should have covered?
No, I think we hit AI, and AI is the big one, right?
Yeah, of course.
For people that listen to this that are veterans, right, and that are military, active duty military, because there's a lot of people that will tune into this particular one in the federal landscape. Sure. I would say that you're working with really great people. Right? In a lot of places in veterans healthcare, you'll say, well, that's deficient or that's deficient. Right? And it's easy to focus on that. It's really easy to focus on the small things and let them become big things. But I think if they step back and look holistically at Veterans Administration and what they're trying to do, and the people that are at the top, and yeah, it may be bumpy and it may be full of bureaucracy, they are really on the right track. they're really, really on the right track. And I would say, stay tuned if you're a veteran. Big things are coming. I hear these conversations. I'm involved in the conversations. A lot of people that are patients aren't, and they only see what Facebook or some other social media thing has to say. If you're in the military, I would say really stay tuned, because the military is being pumped full of dollars right now, and it is geared towards military medicine, and they will be expanding that care and capability exponentially. That's what. Stay tuned. If you're watching this, stay tuned. It's going to be a big, glorious ride.
That's awesome, man. That's perfect. Got to end on that. That's awesome. Thanks, man.
Hey, I think
so. We'll include a link to your profile on LinkedIn in the show notes. Also to Agfa. If there's a specific spot in Agfa, so if there's like, hey, yeah, make sure it's this link, because it's going to be all about military. What you guys are doing. Let me know. If there's other things, if you got an Instagram or Twitter, X or whatever.
Just cooking with the Maxey, Jeremy. That's it. That's just my Instagram. We have cooking channel.
Cooking? Do you?
Yeah. It's amateur hour at best, right? Amateur hour.
Doesn't matter. Send it over, man.
My wife would be devastated on that. It's
okay.
Amateur hour.
But yeah, but I'll do a link to you, LinkedIn. If there's a specific area, normally I just put about, but if there's like a specific place within the Agfa website that people should be going to, and then anything else that you want, we'll make sure it's in the description. So this will probably publish in about 2 weeks, maybe 10 days.
Cool. I'm super excited. I really appreciate the opportunity. There's not a lot of stuff
of course.
To talk about federal healthcare, and it's a big deal.
Yeah. Like I said, we'll have to do it again. Like if anything some big changes happen there, we'll jump back on, do another like a 30-minute session or something.
Absolutely, man. Hey, I appreciate it.
Cool. Well, my friend, you have an awesome rest of the day. Thanks again. Hopefully this was nice and chill, like I said.
It was awesome. Awesome.
Perfect. All right, brother.
Take care, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, man. See you, bud.